Talia Thorne didn't expect her entire life to change because she stopped to help a stranger cross the street, but that's exactly what happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. She was late for her shift at the bookstore, juggling a coffee in one hand and her giant tote bag in the other, when she spotted the older man standing at the curb, clutching his cane like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Cars zoomed past, the crosswalk light blinked red again, and still no one stopped for him. "Do you want help, sir?" she asked, already stepping toward him. The man looked up, startled. His weathered face broke into a grateful smile. "That would be wonderful, young lady." She wrapped her arm gently around his and guided him across with the kind of patience and warmth that came naturally to her. When they reached the other side, he paused, catching his breath. "You didn't have to do that," he said, patting her hand. "No one else would have." Talia laughed lightly. "Well, they should have. You deserved help." The man's eyes softened. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Talia. Talia Thorne." "I'm Walter Varon," he said, giving her a firm nod. "My son's picking me up. He'll be here any second." "I'm glad you're okay, Mr. Varon. I should get going." A black Bentley pulled up beside the curb, sleek and silent. The driver stepped out and opened the rear passenger door. And then, a man came out of the back seat. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her rent. His hair was dark, slightly tousled like he hadn't bothered with it, and his jawline was sharp enough to cut glass. His eyes locked on to hers immediately. "Dad, are you all right?" His voice was deep, authoritative. Walter waved him off. "Perfectly fine, thanks to this young lady." The man looked at Talia now, really looked. Something shifted in his expression. "You helped him." Talia tucked a strand of damp hair behind her ear. "Just got him across the street." "It's nothing." "It's not nothing," he said, stepping closer. "Thank you." She smiled, a little embarrassed. "I'm just glad he's all right." Walter grinned. "Son, are you going to introduce yourself?" The man extended his hand. "Vince Varon." Talia blinked. "Varon?" "As in, yeah," he said, a little amused. "That Varon." She glanced back at the Bentley, then at his watch, definitely a Patek, and suddenly the name clicked. Varon Industries. Global real estate, tech, and luxury development. They were everywhere. And this guy was the heir. She quickly pulled her hand back. "Well, nice to meet you." "You're soaked," Vince said, like it just dawned on him. "And you're shivering." "I'm fine," she said quickly, hugging her coat tighter. "Anyway, I really have to go." "Wait." Vince stepped forward. "Can I give you a ride?" She hesitated. "I'm good, really." Walter stepped in again. "Let him, please." "It's the least we can do. I don't want to trouble anyone." "You helped my father," Vince said. "That's not a small thing to me." The sincerity on his face caught her off guard. And she didn't exactly have an umbrella. "Okay, just to the corner near Brent and West." Vince opened the door for her himself. The ride was quiet at first. The leather seats were warm, the scent of the car something expensive she couldn't name. Vince sat beside her, his arm resting casually on the back of the seat, watching her from the side. "So, what do you do, Talia?" "I work at Page Turner's," she said. "The bookstore on 6th. That little shop with the green awning?" She blinked. "You know it. I pass it sometimes." He paused. "You like it there?" "I do, actually. It's not fancy, but I love books. I'm saving to go back to school. Eventually." He studied her for a second. "What are you studying?" "Publishing. Maybe editing. I don't know, I just want to work with stories." Something about the way she said it made Vince smile. "That makes sense." "What does?" "That you'd help a stranger. You seem like the kind of person who believes in happy endings." She laughed. "Well, someone has to." The car pulled up to the corner, and she reached for the door. "Thanks for the ride." "Wait," Vince said. He pulled out a business card and handed it to her. It was sleek and black, with silver embossed letters. "If you ever need anything." "Seriously." She took it, nodding. "All right." He leaned closer. "I hope I see you again." Talia stepped out into the rain, cheeks flushed, heart pounding for reasons she couldn't quite name. Vince watched her walk away through the rain-streaked window. She was different. She didn't ask about his company. She didn't care about his money. She'd helped his father without a second thought, not knowing who he was. And that smile. Impressive girl, Walter said from the front. She didn't even blink when you said your name. Vince's voice was quiet. Yeah, she's something else. 2 days later, Talia was shelving a shipment of used paperbacks when a delivery guy walked in holding a long black box. For Talia Thorne? She signed for it, confused, and opened it behind the counter. Inside was a single, perfect white rose, and a note tucked beneath it. You helped my father cross the street. I'd like the chance to return a kindness. Dinner? Vince, her heart stuttered. Talia, her manager called. You okay? She looked up, cheeks flushed. I think I just got asked out by a Varon. That night, she stood outside Le Jardin, the most exclusive rooftop restaurant in the city. She almost turned around. Her dress was borrowed, her heels too tight, but then Vince appeared at the entrance. He looked ridiculous, in the best way. Black suit, no tie, perfectly tailored. When he saw her, his face lit up. You came. I almost didn't. I'm glad you did. He offered his arm. She took it. The restaurant was candlelit, the rooftop view showing the whole skyline. Vince didn't even look at the menu. He ordered for both of them, confidently, but after asking what she liked. They talked for hours, about books, family, childhood dreams. And when dessert came, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. I haven't stopped thinking about you since that day. Talia tried to keep steady. You don't even know me. I'd like to change that. He looked at her like she was the most fascinating thing in the world. And for the first time in a long time, she believed maybe happy endings weren't just for books. And neither of them knew it yet, but they were already falling. Talia didn't expect the second date to begin with a gold leaf envelope slid under the bookstore's door before opening hours. The handwriting was elegant, sharp, and unmistakably deliberate for Talia Thorne. Inside was a cream-colored invitation on thick cardstock embossed with curling silver script. It read, Dinner. 8 o'clock. Wear something you feel beautiful in. Your ride will be waiting. She read it 3 times before her knees unlocked. By the time evening fell, she stood in front of her apartment window watching the sleek black town car idle at the curb. In her reflection, she barely recognized herself. The navy satin dress had been dropped off earlier that afternoon with no return address. It felt like it had been made for her. She didn't know how he guessed her size, but the fabric hugged her in a way that made her forget the price tag probably had more digits than her bank balance. When the driver opened the car door, she stepped inside, her pulse fluttering. The car glided through the city before stopping in front of a building she'd only seen in glossy magazines. A doorman greeted her by name and led her inside without hesitation. The elevator opened to a private terrace that overlooked the river, lit by hundreds of tiny suspended lights that looked like stars had descended just for her. Vince stood near the edge of the terrace, a bottle of wine in one hand, 2 glasses already waiting on the glass table beside him. You found it, he said, smiling. I think I'm dreaming, Talia said, stepping forward slowly. Is this your place? One of them. She raised an eyebrow. How many do you have? Too many for someone who barely sleeps, he admitted, pouring her a glass before handing it over. What do you do when you can't sleep? She asked, taking a cautious sip. I work, or I walk. Sometimes I end up on rooftops like this one. Quiet helps me think. And what are you thinking now? She asked, her voice softer. He looked at her for a long moment. That I'm glad you didn't ignore that envelope. She glanced around the terrace. This is a lot. I wanted to see you again without 1,000 people around. There weren't 1,000 people at the restaurant. There were enough, he said. But tonight, it's just us. They sat at the small table where dinner was already laid out: filet, roasted vegetables, delicate sauces she couldn't name. Vince didn't comment on the food, he asked about her favorite author instead. Do you always ask about books at dinner? She asked, amused. I ask about what matters to the person sitting across from me, he said, not missing a beat. She set her fork down. You're used to getting what you want, aren't you? Yes, he answered without arrogance. But not always what I need. She studied him. And what do you need? He didn't answer right away. I'm still trying to figure that out. But I think you're part of it. Talia wasn't sure what stunned her more, the words or the ease with which he said them. I'm not used to people being so forward, she said. I don't waste time, he replied. Life's too short to wait for perfect timing. She looked away, needing a second to breathe. Why did you really ask me out? She asked at last. Vince leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable now. Because when I saw you helping my father, I realized I was watching something rare. Someone doing the right thing without expecting anything in return. That doesn't happen often in my world. And what world is that? She asked carefully. A world where kindness is currency and most people only give when they know they'll get more back. She looked at him for a long moment. You think I'm different? I know you are. They fell into silence after that, the kind that wasn't awkward but weighty. The wind picked up slightly, brushing a strand of her hair across her cheek. Vince reached over and tucked it behind her ear. His touch lingered for a second too long. Can I show you something? He asked. She nodded. He led her through a glass door into the penthouse, past sleek furniture and walls filled with abstract art, to a room lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. But what caught her attention wasn't the view. It was the piano. He sat on the bench, motioned for her to join him. She hesitated, then sat beside him. I didn't peg you for a musician. I'm not, he said. But this is the one thing that slows my brain down. He played a few quiet notes, something soft and low. Then he looked at her. What slows yours? Reading, she said after a moment. Lying on the fire escape with a blanket when it's warm out. Listening to people walk by. He nodded like he understood that deeply. Do you always go this far on a second date? She asked, the question gentle but curious. No, he said. I've never had a second date like this before. And what happens after this? That depends, he said, his gaze steady. Will there be another? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached over and pressed a single note on the piano. It echoed softly before fading. I don't know, she said honestly. You're a lot, and I'm not sure I belong in all of this. You don't have to belong in my world, he said. I just want to be in yours. She looked at him then, really looked. And for the first time since they'd met, she saw something just beneath the surface of the confidence, a kind of loneliness that mirrored her own. I should go, she said softly, rising. He stood too but didn't stop her. Let me drive you. She shook her head. I think I need to walk. Clear my thoughts. He didn't argue. At the elevator, he handed her a black umbrella. In case it rains. She took it without a word. As the doors closed between them, Vince stood still, staring at the empty space where she'd been. His hands curled into fists at his sides. And back on the street, Talia walked alone, the city thrumming around her, the umbrella unopened at her side, her heart full of questions she hadn't felt ready to ask. Talia stared at the row of receipts in front of her, but none of the numbers were registering. The bookstore was quiet, the usual hum of the espresso machine in the corner long since silenced for the evening. Outside, the sky had turned a dusky violet, but she hadn't moved from the counter in over an hour. Her mind was still on the rooftop, the lights, the music, the way Vince had looked at her like he was seeing something he couldn't quite name. She hadn't expected the silence that followed after she walked away. No calls, no notes, no deliveries, just space. And that unsettled her more than anything. Earth to Talia, came Juno's voice from behind the stacks. Talia flinched. Sorry. Zoned out. That's the third time this week. You okay? Talia closed the ledger. Yeah, just tired. Juno walked over, wiping her hands on a towel. You're not tired. You're thinking. And when you think, you chew the inside of your cheek and stare at things like they owe you money. Talia laughed under her breath. Is it that obvious? Only to people who know you. Spill it. Talia hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of the counter. I went on 2 dates with someone. Juno raised an eyebrow. And? He's complicated. Complicated how? Talia exhaled. He's not like us. He's from a different orbit. Juno leaned in. Is this orbit made of money? Talia gave her a look. It's not about that. Aha, you've got that look. The one that says you're terrified and thrilled at the same time. Talia didn't deny it. She just stood, grabbed her coat, and said, I'll see you tomorrow. Outside, the air was colder than she expected. She pulled her scarf tighter and started walking. She didn't notice the black SUV idling across the street until it eased forward and glided to a stop beside her. The door opened. Vince stepped out. He wasn't in a suit this time. Dark jeans, a cashmere coat, boots that had clearly seen actual wear. His hair was wind-tousled, and there were faint shadows beneath his eyes. I was hoping I'd find you here. Talia stopped. You've been waiting? Driving. Thinking. I keep ending up here. She crossed her arms. Why? Because this is the place where I met you. And I haven't been able to get that moment out of my head. She didn't answer him. Can I walk with you? He asked. She hesitated, then gave a single nod. They walked in silence for a few blocks, their steps echoing on the sidewalk. It wasn't until they reached the small pedestrian bridge over the canal that he spoke again. I didn't want to push you, he said. When you left that night, I thought maybe I came on too strong. You didn't, she said quietly. That's the problem. He looked at her, puzzled. When something feels too good, she said, I start waiting for the part where it falls apart. I'm not going anywhere. You say that now, but I've seen people walk away for less. He leaned against the railing, looking out at the water. I've had a lot of people want things from me, but I can count on one hand the people who've ever looked at me the way you did. Like I was just a person. Talia joined him at the railing. Maybe that's because I didn't know who you were. Then I'm lucky you didn't. She turned to face him. What is this, Vince? Are we just killing time? Or is this something you're actually serious about? He didn't hesitate. I'm not interested in wasting your time. I want to see where this can go. But I need you to trust that I mean that. Trust takes time. Then I'll give you all the time you need. They stood like that for a while, the city buzzing faintly behind them. Then he said, come with me this weekend. She blinked. What? I'm flying to Venice. There's a property I'm finalizing there. But it's a quick trip, 2 nights. I want you to come. She stared at him. I can't just drop everything and fly to Italy. Why not? I have work. Bills. A cat I'm fostering. I'll make sure you're back by Monday morning. I'll take care of the logistics. She shook her head. You can't just fix everything with money. I'm not trying to fix anything. I'm inviting you. And what would I even wear to Venice? He met her eyes. I'll take care of that too. Talia backed a step. You have to stop doing that. Doing what? Making impossible things sound so easy. He stepped closer. They're not impossible. You just haven't had someone in your corner before. She looked up at him, searching for cracks in the confidence. But instead of arrogance, she saw something else. Hope. And maybe fear. Say yes, he said. She didn't answer. Instead, she turned and started walking. He didn't follow. But the next morning, a vintage leather suitcase waited outside her apartment door. Her name was embossed on the tag in gold. Inside were 3 outfits, perfectly tailored, and a note in his handwriting. The flight leaves at 10. There's a seat next to me if you want it. Talia stood there a long time, heart pounding. Then she packed her own worn canvas bag, grabbed her passport from the shoebox under her bed, and took a cab to the airport. She didn't know what would happen, but she knew she wasn't ready to walk away from the one person who looked at her like she wasn't just passing through his life, but changing it. They landed in Venice just before sunset, a golden haze spilling over the canals like honey. The private jet had touched down smoothly, but Talia's thoughts hadn't. The entire flight, she'd sat beside Vince in a daze of quiet questions and quieter glances, trying to make sense of the way her life had tilted so suddenly. Now she stood on the stone landing of a centuries-old palazzo, her boots echoing against the marble as a man in a navy coat opened a pair of arched doors to reveal a foyer that looked like it belonged in a dream. The air smelled faintly of bergamot, and something older like time itself had settled into the walls. Vince took her coat without asking. "You don't have to be nervous, you know?" "I'm not nervous," she said, folding her arms. "You're holding your breath." She exhaled slowly. "That obvious?" He smiled, but it was different this time, quieter, almost reverent. "This place belonged to my mother's side of the family. I used to come here as a kid, before everything got complicated." Talia tilted her head. "What happened?" He paused, then led her into a room where tall windows opened onto a balcony. The canal below glistened under the setting sun. "My mother died when I was 15, and this place became a ghost." She didn't speak. Instead, she reached out and touched the carved wood of the window frame, grounding herself in the moment. "I brought it back to life last year," Vince said. "Restored everything. I wanted to keep something of her that felt untouched." Talia turned to him. "You still miss her?" "Every day." She stepped toward him, her voice gentler now. "You don't talk about her much, do you?" "Almost never," he admitted. "But with you, it doesn't feel like a risk." They stood there, the quiet between them rich with something unspoken. Later, over dinner in a room lit by antique sconces and flickering firelight, she asked the question that had been pressing at her chest since the plane lifted off. "What happens when this trip ends?" Vince set down his glass. "What do you want to happen?" "I don't know," she said truthfully. "It's all been so fast, and I keep waiting for the part where reality catches up." He leaned forward. "Then let me slow it down. Stay. Not forever, just a few more days. No pressure. No plans. Just us." She blinked. "You'd rearrange your schedule for that?" "I already did." Talia looked down at her plate. "Why are you so certain about me?" "I'm not," he said. "That's what makes it real." She looked up, caught completely off guard. "You're not. I don't know where this ends, but I know what I feel when I'm near you. And I haven't had that in a long time." She reached for her wine, then changed her mind and folded her hands instead. "I'm scared." "So am I." That night, she didn't sleep. Not because of uncertainty, but because she stood on the balcony, staring out at the city, feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in years. Possibility. The next morning, she woke to the sound of church bells echoing across the water. Vince was already gone. A note left on the pillow in his steady handwriting. "Back before lunch. There's something I want to show you." She wandered the palazzo, eventually finding a small room tucked behind the library. A light was on inside. Drawn by curiosity, she stepped in. It was a studio. Sketches lined the walls, buildings, bridges, entire cityscapes. Pinned among them was a charcoal drawing of a woman standing beneath a lamppost, holding a book in one hand, her coat pulled tight against the wind. It was her. She stared at it, her throat tightening. The detail was impossible, the tilt of her head, the tension in her shoulders. He hadn't been guessing. He'd been watching. "You weren't supposed to see that yet," Vince said from the doorway. She turned. "You drew this." "I sketch when I can't sleep." "That night after the rooftop, I couldn't stop thinking about how you looked standing in the rain." Talia walked toward him slowly. "You said you weren't sure about me. But this. I'm not sure where we're going, but I'm sure of how I feel." She stopped in front of him. "Then say it." He didn't hesitate. "I'm in love with you." She froze. "I don't know exactly when it happened. Maybe it was the bookstore or Venice or how you listen like no one ever has. But I know I love you, and I'm not going to pretend that's not the truth." Talia's breath caught in her throat. "I didn't come here to fall in love." "I didn't either," he said. "But here we are." She stepped back, overwhelmed. "This is too much." "No, it's just real. That's why it feels big." She looked at him, her chest rising and falling. "I don't have $1 million life. I have a paycheck-to-paycheck life. I don't belong in palazzos or private jets." He stepped forward. You don't need to belong in any of that. You belong with me. She blinked fast, trying to keep her voice steady. And what does that mean? It means I don't want to go back to New York without you. Talia stared at him, stunned into stillness. Then, slowly, she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something small. A keychain. A tiny brass book weathered with age. This was my mom's, she said quietly. She gave it to me before she left. Said it would open the right door one day. Vince took it gently, turning it over in his hand. I never knew what that meant until now, she continued. But I think this is the door. She stepped closer, her face barely a breath from his. I love you too. He kissed her, and the world fell away. 2 weeks later, under a glass canopy in a garden filled with soft music and laughter, Vince stood at the altar in a navy suit with his father beside him. The guests were few, just the people who mattered. Talia walked down the aisle barefoot in a simple ivory dress, her eyes locked on his. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're the only thing I've ever been sure of." And when she said her vows, she didn't promise perfection. She promised honesty, laughter, love that didn't disappear when the rain came. In the end, it wasn't about the palazzos or the planes or the rooftop dinners. It was about one moment, one kindness, one step across the street that changed everything. And the man who'd been watching from the car, falling in love before he even knew her name. The morning sunlight poured into the penthouse windows, casting soft gold across the marble floors. Talia stood barefoot in the kitchen, wearing one of Vince's shirts, flipping through a catalog of flooring samples. Not because she knew anything about tile finishes, but because Vince had asked her opinion. Slate or herringbone? She asked, holding up the 2 samples as Vince walked in, still drying his hair with a towel. He glanced at them, then at her. Whichever one you like. You're the one who has to live with it. She raised an eyebrow. We both live here? He leaned in to kiss her cheek, his voice warm. Exactly. The last few months had passed in a blur of transitions, merging lives, renovating the loft above the bookstore into a shared studio, learning each other's coffee preferences, sleep habits, and emotional fault lines. Vince still ran the empire, but the corners of his world had softened. The man who once spent nights in boardrooms now spent mornings reading next to her on the balcony, sometimes in silence, sometimes with his head on her lap. Talia had taken a leave from the bookstore to focus on her manuscript. Vince insisted it was time she wrote her own story, not just shelved others. She'd resisted at first, old fears, old patterns, but she couldn't deny the way the words came easier now, like they'd been waiting for her to believe in them. Hey, he said, coming behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. We still on for tonight? I didn't forget, she said. But are you sure about this? It's a big deal. That's the point. She turned in his arms. You've never brought anyone to the Varon Foundation Gala before. I've never wanted to. Talia hesitated. What if they don't accept me? Vince's expression didn't falter. Then they'll have to learn. Because you're not going anywhere. Her chest tightened, but not from fear. She nodded. That evening, a driver arrived to take them to the gala. Talia wore a deep emerald gown with a low back and delicate sleeves that shimmered under the chandelier light. Vince, in a tailored black tuxedo, didn't stop looking at her the entire ride. I might cancel the event and take you straight to the coast, he murmured as their car pulled up to the Grand Hotel. You're making it very hard to be responsible. She reached for his hand. Let's get through the night. Then you can reward yourself with whatever irresponsible behavior you like. The ballroom was a tapestry of crystal, silk, and whispered names. As they entered, heads turned. Talia felt the weight of it: curiosity, speculation, judgment, but Vince's hand remained steady in hers, grounding her. When they reached the main table, a sharply dressed woman approached, her posture regal, her smile practiced. Vince, she said, kissing both his cheeks. It's been too long. Lucinda, this is Talia. Lucinda's eyes flicked over Talia's dress, then her face. You're the woman who convinced him to turn down the London acquisition. Talia blinked. I didn't. She made me realize I didn't want to live in hotels for the next decade. Vince cut in smoothly. We're building something better here. Lucinda offered a surprised smile. Well, you certainly look grounded. Later, as they danced beneath a canopy of chandeliers, Talia whispered, I think I passed. You didn't have to, he said, his voice low against her ear. Just being you is enough. The music shifted, the tempo slowing. As they moved together, Talia felt the rest of the room blur. I've been thinking, he said. Dangerous words. I want to do more with the Varon Foundation. Not just galas and funding. Real community work. Something local. With books. Maybe a literacy center. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Are you serious? I want you to help me build it. You know the world I don't. She searched his face. That's not a small ask. I know. But I'm not asking lightly. Talia's heart swelled. Then yes. They didn't leave the gala early, but they were the last to return to the penthouse. He kissed her in the elevator before the doors even closed, and again in the hallway, and again as they stumbled into the bedroom laughing. There was no pretense left between them. Only the kind of intimacy that came from choosing each other every day. Weeks later, spring came early. The courtyard below their building bloomed with cherry blossoms, and Talia spent most mornings writing on the terrace. Vince worked from the converted studio, his meetings interspersed with visits to her desk just to press a kiss to her shoulder or steal a line of dialogue from her pages. One afternoon, she came home from a walk to find the lights dimmed and the scent of jasmine in the air. A trail of paperbacks, her favorites, led to the rooftop where Vince stood beneath an archway of fairy lights. A string quartet played softly in the background and the city skyline shimmered behind him. Her breath caught. He didn't kneel. He didn't need to. I don't want a wedding planner, he said. I want a life planner. I want you. Every morning. Every stubborn argument. Every quiet night reading the same paragraph together. Marry me. Talia didn't speak. She walked to him, took his face in her hands, and kissed him with the kind of certainty that didn't require words. They married in the garden behind the bookstore, surrounded by people who had watched them grow. Walter gave a toast that made everyone cry. Vince's father danced with Talia like she was already family. And when the last song played, Vince pulled her into him, whispered something only she could hear, and kissed her like it was the first time all over again. Years passed. The Literacy Center opened on her 30th birthday. They named it the Thorne House not after her, but after the belief she carried, that stories could change lives. Talia published her first book the following year. The dedication read, "For the man who saw me before I saw myself. For the moment that crossed the street and changed everything." They traveled. They returned to Venice on anniversaries. They argued, made up, built a life with the kind of ordinary magic most people never find. And one rainy afternoon, as Vince read next to her with their newborn daughter asleep on his chest, Talia looked at the life around her, the quiet, the love, the full circle of it all, and smiled. Because somewhere between a street corner and a rooftop, she had found the ending she never dared to believe in. And it was only just beginning.